This is Larry Shapiro, and this month we're going to be talking about luminosity masking, which is really an incredible tool and improving photographs in light in that you can't improve in Lightroom, but you can improve in Photoshop. You need to understand some basic concepts of layer masking, which is white mask reveals and a black mask conceals the effect that you're doing. Luminosity masking is basically a selection tool based on the luminosity or brightness value in an image. It allows you to create highly targeted selections with seamless feathering. I'm going to start off by looking at a photograph that I took in Zion National Park. This is the raw file, and I've done nothing to it. You can see what I was doing was trying to get this really interesting sky and have the burnt tree still have some detail in it. When I try to create the more dramatic sky, what happens is the detail in the tree disappears. Now, here is a photograph that it's the same image when I've processed as best I could in Lightroom. Now, here is a value. Here's the one without any local adjustments, just changes in highlights and shadows and exposure. Here is one where I took and used the gradient tool, and you can see where in this case, the red area is what's going to be affected by decreasing the exposure and decreasing the contrast. Now, as you can see, I can't get those branches to be not affected by this. Even when I show the luminosity mask, add the luminosity masking in Lightroom based on luminance, and try to change the range, I just can't get it where I want it. So this is a picture that really needs to be looked at in Photoshop and having a luminance mask. Now, I have Photoshop open. That's not Photoshop. I have Photoshop open. I opened this picture up, and what I have done is used a tool. It's actually an extension called TK Actions. This is a free program by Tony Kyer, and here's the link. It basically gives you all these masks. Now, if we go down and look at the actual mask, what does that mean by a light mask? Well, when you click on this panel, on this layer in the channels panel, you'll see that the light area here is highlighted in white, and the darker areas are in either black or dark gray. And as we go through, this is the most, has all the light areas. This one has more intense brightness, more brightness, very bright, most bright, okay? Similarly, with the darks, if I click on the dark ones, now remember things are reversed. The dark areas, which would let the effect go through, are the lightest areas, and the black is where the effect will not be shown at all. And again, you can start, as we click through the different masks, you can see you're decreasing the effect or decreasing the luminosity, and therefore selectively the mask. Now, what's really interesting about luminosity masking is notice that it's not just a black or a white mask. There are shades of gray, and the gray partially gives you the effect that you're adding on, and so that you have this sort of seamless feathering. All right, so let's go back to the very beginning here, and my goal is still the same thing. I want to darken the sky, I want to lighten the foreground, and I want to make this a more dramatic picture. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to lighten the sky. So I'm going to, whenever you want to select a channel to create a selection, you press the Command or Control key, and then you click on it, and you'll see the marching ants come up in the sky primarily, although if you look very closely, there are some down here. Now I'm going to go down to my adjustment layers, and I like using levels for luminosity masking, and you'll see why levels work so nicely. It brings up a histogram, and I'm going to push the dark areas up, and what I'm looking at is over here, I'm instantaneously seeing the effect. I'm darkening, getting more detail in the clouds, but I'm not affecting anything down here. So far, so good. All right, now I want to deal with this area down here. So I want to look for a dark mask, and I've already looked at this, and I know that the darks 4 works best, but we can sort of go through this. And the reason that I want a darks 4 is because look at darks 3. You're starting to see some white areas in the sky, and I don't want the sky to be affected at all. So when I go to a darks 4, I'm mainly selecting things down here. Nothing in the sky is being selected. So I'm going to click on the darks 4. You'll see the marching ants, and then I'm going to go here for an adjustment layer. I'm going to go to levels, and now, when you're dealing with this kind of situation where you've only got a part of the histogram, what I like to do is increase the midtones. Increase the midtone slider where I get my contrast correct, and then I push down the light slider till I bring up the area that I want. And because this is a tough one, because you don't want to wash out the dark areas. Let's give myself a little bit more space here, and that looks pretty good. Okay, now one of the nice things about having a mask is that you can actually mask in the mask. So I can click on this mask, and what's nice about painting on a mask, when you select your brush and you use the overlay method, you're only going to be painting in the area where the mask is white. So if I wanted to increase the contrast in this area, I can paint in some white paint, but it actually only goes into the white areas. If I try to paint over here, nothing's going to happen because that's already blacked out. And so this gives me sort of increased contrast in this dark area. And so I've got, a much better looking image. Now, I'm going to continue to do things, but you can always check back and forth on this. If you hit Command and Option and then click on the eyeball, you go back to the original. So as you can go back and forth, and you can see, where am I? Now, one of the things I can do at this point is I want to increase the saturation here. Now, I can, if I just put an adjustment curve and say I want to increase saturation, let's see what happens. Well, sort of I'm getting in the shadows where I want, but I'm also creating too much of a blue in the sky, so I don't like that. So I'm going to get rid of this layer, and instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this mask with my Command key down, so I get the shadow areas selected. I'm going to then go up to hue saturation, and I'm going to increase the saturation there. I may change no, I don't want to change the lightness very much, but I've got a much more controlled situation. Okay, so now I have this image, and I'm going to go back and forth here again. I think I've made a much better picture. I still have, as we look at the detail here in the tree branches, you see that you have not darkened the branches to any significant extent, and you're able to still darken the skies. I don't know any selection method using any of the standard Lightroom tools that would allow you to select such a fine detailed tree branches and make the changes that you wanted. So luminosity masking is really a very interesting subject. It gives you a lot of control, but you have to practice with this. And now this is the free version of the TK Actions. I actually have bought, which is not that expensive. I think when I bought it, it was about $40. He has a very sophisticated and easy to use panel, but as I said, you can just have the free one and work through it just like I have. Hope this helps. Thanks.